citizen statements. Do we have any citizen statements? No one signed up. So 4.0, call for a closed meeting. There is none. 5.0, approval of agenda. It says April 12, 2010. Should that say May 3rd?
Mine says May 3rd.
Mine says May 3rd.
Mine says May 3rd. Mine says May 3rd. Can you tell?
I better check my iPhone app. Is it May 3rd? Yes.
I trust mine.
Approval of agenda May 3rd, 2010. May I have a motion and a second for approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries 7-0. 6.0, items for review or action. 6.01, discussion of superintendent search process. And we are convening our initial special meeting in this process. I'm guessing it won't be our last. The items for this evening, as discussed at our previous board meeting, we had 4 topics that we were going to break down into separate groups and then report back. I guess just to set the table for the whole thing, I would like to read Ref A, which my old boss in the Navy always insisted was a key to success. So somewhere in here I've got our board policy on the superintendent and qualifications thereof. And I'm not going to come up with it right off the top of my head, so bear with me for a second. Oh well, so much for my elegant lead-in. As I recall, the main criteria for legal requirements for a superintendent in the state of Missouri are a certificate from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, a master's degree, and that's essentially it. Is that correct, Mrs. Flamba? Okay. Just so we know what the legal parameters of the target are. And then I guess if to begin the discussion, Mrs. Mogerman, I think you had a topic on leadership profile. Do you want to start there?
Yes, and we talked about it, and we felt it was too soon to really develop a profile of the leader that we want. First of all, if we do hire a search firm, that will be part of the exercise that they provide for us. Secondly, we would probably want to get feedback from our community, from the different community groups we have. So maybe that's what we should talk about right now. And since Nathan is here, he would be unfortunately
Yes.
not coming. So I don't know if you and Beth, also you were on that group, right? Was it you?
Leadership, no, Sam at first.
Sam.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I guess it was you I talked to, I'm sorry.
Correct.
Okay. So I don't know if you had any other thoughts, but that's kind of where we left it.
Well, I think the one piece that I'd like to inject, obviously not tonight, but a next step for everybody's perusal. Beth, I think in your search regarding search firms, you came across the materials from the previous search. Is that correct?
I did.
And I think you said there was a leadership profile from 6 years ago.
There was.
And obviously, everybody else hasn't seen it yet, but it certainly seems to me that if Parkway being Parkway and the culture that we all know and love, I think we ought to be aware of the historical background. And is there a few paragraphs you can share with us right now?
Sure. Well, this is the ad that was placed in Education Week and Teacher Magazine to February 11, 2004.
Okay.
The ideal candidate will have significant hands-on administrative experience in a high-performing school environment, extensive experience in school administration at a large public or private educational institution, demonstrated expertise in program development, curriculum and instruction, and enthusiastically implement the Parkway School District's structure, philosophy, mission, and values. A PhD or EDD in education or related field is preferred. The individual must hold or be eligible for Missouri certification as a teacher and/or administrator. The ideal candidate must be passionately committed to children, possess strong organizational, operational, and interpersonal skills, demonstrate leadership ability, possess excellent public relations skills, be a flexible and creative problem solver, believe in data-driven decision-making, be able to communicate effectively in writing and orally, be able to effectively advise and direct the board to address key challenges and issues, and demonstrate an ability to work with the educational goals set by the Parkway Board of Education.
Okay. Sounds like a good starting point. And I guess to leverage off that, I think we also have materials on surveys that were performed back at the time, and I'm sure they were directed to teachers and
There were
administrators.
surveys from every major stakeholder group, surveys from the board, surveys from the staff, and surveys from the community.
Okay.
Were these surveys mailed out to people?
I just saw the results.
Oh, so we don't know. Do you have any recollection?
They had meetings, come in and meet with the search firm people,
Well, with the firm is established.
firm actually,
Yeah.
and students, just to add to that.
And I guess we touched on it, I think, in our initial discussions with with some of the resources we have on board now in the district, technology, as well as the expertise of Dr. Tyson. I guess, could you share with us any thoughts on methodologies and
Yeah, absolutely.
For the moment, focused on that leadership profile and trying to maximize input from the community?
Absolutely. It kind of depends on the route you want to go. If we want to go ahead and develop a survey, I would recommend getting either a committee of folks together. It could even be the Board of Education yourselves. Kind of getting together in a work session and really going through, maybe using that as a starting point, the job description that we had for the last superintendent, but really trying to flesh out some guiding questions. It's really more of a question of process when you talk about survey development. You want to start with those guiding questions. So what are the questions that we need to answer through a survey? What information are we trying to get? Really all a survey does is it reduces our uncertainty about what the public or the community at large believes about what they want for their next superintendent. And so we start with those guiding questions. As soon as we get those guiding questions, you can really let me take over for a little bit and just kind of craft what I think would be a good survey to really get at those questions. There's a lot of things you look at in terms of coming up with the questions. I don't know if I need to bore you guys with all of those pieces, but you do want to be.
Sure.
Some of the things that are very important is you want to make sure that you're getting at the validity piece and the reliability piece. So the validity means that we're really trying to, when we put this survey out, it's measuring what we want it to measure, what it's intended to measure. And you guys might think that that's kind of a no-brainer, but a lot of times if you don't construct the questions correctly, if they aren't concise, if they aren't clear, if they don't get to the heart of the matter, a lot of times survey language needs to be very simple. You want to make sure that it's going to be well understood by everyone. And so as long as you can kind of grab at that, you should be able to get, measure what you're supposed to be measuring from a survey. There's other ways that we can check to make sure that happens after we get the survey responses back. Through some statistical analysis, there's a KR20, there's also correlational type studies that you can do to make sure that the answers that we got are consistent, and that's the reliability piece that comes in as well. So yeah, I can really, as long as I work with a group, or it might even be yourselves, coming up with those guiding questions, and I really have a good understanding of what we need to know or find out from the public or from the major stakeholders, I can kind of craft something, and then typically what we do at that point is we give it back to a small group of folks. And usually they take that survey and then they comment on it. It's kind of like a pretest. And you want to do that because as good as a person gets at writing surveys, and Dan Coates would tell you this as well, as soon as they get it good, they might think they're very good or they might have done it a lot, there's always little things that you don't foresee or you don't know, or yeah, they didn't really understand it, but I thought they would. And that comes back when you have kind of that focus group. Take the survey and they can really comment and say, I had no clue what this meant. Or someone might say, well, I thought it meant that, and the other person might say, oh no, it didn't, it meant that to me. So you got to get that all cleared up before you get it out to the public. Otherwise you run into some biases and different things like that that are going to be a disaster. You got to make sure that the survey is good before it goes out. Once it goes out and you realize that there's some problems with it, it's really hard to reel it back in. Yeah. So you do a lot of upfront work, kind of led by those guiding questions. But no, I feel confident that we could really put together a nice survey, depending exactly on what the board's needs are.
Okay, and you mentioned several steps there, the developing
It would,
guiding
yeah, it's really.
questions, actually writing questions, a test drive, if you will.
Yeah, it's a process,
What-
and it does take
what-
some time.
What can you give us an estimate in weeks or
Well,
days, or what's the?
I can certainly drop everything and work on that. I would want to go ahead. It would really.
Dr. Melito's not here this evening.
It would really be a question of how often that group, and like I said, it might be you guys. I'm not sure how you guys really want to do this, or if you just want to get some of your key stakeholders involved to be the ones. But it's how often can that group get together? Because it's got to be a collaborative process to at least get those guiding questions firmed up and get a good idea about what we think the superintendent should look like. I don't think you guys just want to know what I think a superintendent should, but so yeah, that's why I would want to make sure that we had plenty of people kind of involved in that process. But in terms of some of the technicalities of the survey, once we get it, where we think it's good to go out, in a district of our size, with the stakeholders. Really, it's not that many surveys we need to put out to get a representative sample. So we really don't have to bug a whole lot of people, but we want to make sure that the sample is representative and that it's random. And I can help you out with that as well. So I would like to do that, and I think it would be a fun exercise.
So you would recommend probably mailing them out?
Well, that's a good thing. You know the way Gallup does it. Gallup calls. And the reason they call is because your response rate skyrockets. That response rate is terrible because if you mail it out, you tend to not get a lot of people responding. The people who do respond are the ones who feel strongly one way or the other. Right. And so when you do a phone call, you're really kind of making sure that even if that person, sometimes you've been caught on the phone. I mean, I know a lot of us with caller ID, we just don't even answer it anymore. But once they're on the phone and you're talking to them, I think since it says Parkway, we're going to get a good shot with the caller ID even, that people are interested and they care about their school district. I think they're really going to want to answer that survey. And I think that the telephone is your best bet. Now, if you do that, though, it does cost some more money because you have to get someone who's going to do that job. And I could certainly work with whoever that is, or like I said, if we can just drop everything in our department, myself and my secretary, my assistant, we could work on even making those calls if that's what the needs of the district are, and we'd be happy to do that.
So just throwing out an email and saying, go to this website and respond.
Terrible idea. Terrible. Yeah, because one of the problems with one of the problems with that, if you're a company and you work in web applications and all of your clients are web-based people and they're responding through the internet, then there's no problem with that because everyone has that technology. In our district especially, we have people who we want to know what they think who don't have computers or access to email. So, and then also you run into that same issue of the non-response. People get it, they just don't care. The ones who do respond care one way or the other really strongly. And so you tend to get what's called non-response bias.
But shouldn't you try
Our community. And making sure that they understand